Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, so today we're diving into this crazy, quiet phenomenon happening right under our noses. So many longtime homeowners are waking up and realizing their property is worth way, way more than they ever thought. And honestly, uncovering that real data-driven number is an absolute game changer for your peace of mind. Let's jump right in. Let me just start by asking you something directly. When was the last time you actually checked your home's true value? And no, I don't mean just some vague guess or what your neighbor's cousin thinks their place is worth. I mean, if you've been living in your house for decades, do you really know what it's worth today in the current living, breathing market? For most folks, the answer is a resounding no. And here's the thing. That lack of information, it can completely shape your future plans in ways you might not even realize. Let's look at a real-world example here. So Diane, she lived in her Chicago area home in Homewood for 31 years. Last spring, she decided she wanted a rough idea of what the house was worth. Basically, a neighbor had just listed a similar spot, her daughter was getting curious, you know how it goes. Well, Diane just assumed her home's value would be pretty modest. And why? Because she was totally fixated on the fact that she still had her original 1994 kitchen cabinets. Plus, she knew the house needed a new roof. Aside from some fresh paint, she really hadn't updated much at all. But man, talk about a stark contrast between expectation and reality. On one hand, you have Diane expecting this super modest valuation, right? Thinking it's being dragged down by aging cabinets and an old roof. But on the other hand, when the actual data was pulled for recent sales in her neighborhood, the estimate came back at nearly double what she expected. Literally double. She actually had to sit down and just stare at the number. It totally highlights this massive gap between perception and reality, a gap that, honestly, countless longtime homeowners are experiencing right now without even knowing it. So, to understand why Diane was so completely blown away, we've got to look at the macro data. $200,000. According to the National Association of Realtors, homeowners in their 60s who have owned their property for over 2 decades typically rack up roughly $200,000, or even more, in housing wealth. And get this, that is just from price appreciation alone. It's absolutely staggering. It's like having this invisible wealth just sitting right under your feet. And this really puts into perspective just how impactful that wealth is. For a lot of people, this hidden housing wealth is actually 5 times larger than their typical retirement savings. Let that sink in for a second. The 4 walls around you could very well be the single most significant financial asset you hold, far outpacing the retirement accounts you probably check every single month. The local data quietly backs this all up too. Recent Redfin market data for the Chicago area shows the median home sale price hitting $380,000, paired with an 8.6% year-over-year increase. And it's those steady, persistent climbs that really add up quietly year after year. Most homeowners simply don't notice this compounding growth until they actually stop, take a breath, and check the hard data. And the hyperlocal data? It can be even more dramatic. Crane's Chicago Business recently reported that in strong South Suburbs communities, places like Flossmoor, homes are frequently selling super fast and often right at full asking price. So if you live in a thriving community like that and you haven't checked your home's value in a few years, the real current number might genuinely and wonderfully catch you off guard. So you've got to wonder, why do so many smart homeowners underestimate what they own? Well, it usually comes down to 3 massive mental roadblocks. First up, price anchoring. We just remember the price we paid decades ago and completely freeze that number in our minds. Second, we focus way too heavily on the negatives, the leaky faucet or those old carpets, instead of looking at what the home has gained through natural appreciation. And third, we compare the house only to its own past, completely ignoring what similar homes around us are actually selling for today. Which brings us right back to Diane. While she was hyper-focused on staring at her 1994 kitchen cabinets, she was completely missing external community factors. I mean, she rarely thought about the new families moving into her area, or the renovated local schools, or even the transit upgrades that made commuting downtown so much faster. She just didn't factor any of that community growth into her mental math, but you can absolutely bet every single bit of it showed up in her home's current market value. Now, we do have to address a specific local reality here, especially if you're in Illinois. People often confuse rising property taxes, which, let's face it, are undeniably high here, with their equity gains. Homeowners sometimes assume that high taxes mean their equity gains are somehow getting canceled out or minimized. But here's the thing. Rising taxes are an expense, while rising home values are wealth accumulation. It is absolutely vital to separate these two concepts if you want a clear, accurate picture of your overall financial health. Of course, actually checking the data removes all this guesswork. And honestly, it goes both ways. Take Robert, for example, another homeowner from the South Suburbs. Now, unlike Diane, Robert assumed his home was worth way more because he put in this custom home theater. But, as he learned, highly personalized upgrades don't always translate dollar for dollar in the real estate market. His estimate actually came in a bit lower than he expected. But look, whether the number is higher or lower, assumptions built on emotion rarely match the market. You really just need the facts. Because once you know your real number, you gain something absolutely invaluable: options, the whole shebang. You might simply choose to stay put, but now you're doing so with full information. Or you could use that newfound equity to fund aging-in-place modifications, or maybe downsize to an easier home. You could even just plan a stress-free move down the line, simply because you finally know exactly what you're working with financially. The beautiful thing is, none of those paths require an immediate decision. I highly recommend revisiting your home's value every year or two, treating it as a gentle, low-pressure financial health check. Think about it. You probably check your retirement accounts regularly, right? Well, your home is likely a much larger asset. It deserves the exact same level of routine attention to keep you informed without ever rushing you into any choices. And if you're over 50 and want to go through this process, guidance really matters. Look for an agent with an SRES designation. That stands for Seniors Real Estate Specialist. Having this credential means you're partnering with someone who is professionally trained to understand local senior housing options and some really specific financing nuances. But most importantly, it means they know how to walk you through these exact conversations gently, factually, and completely free of any pressure to sell. Which brings us right to the resolution of our opening story. In the end, Diane actually didn't sell her home that spring. And honestly, that was a fantastic outcome. The goal was never to push a sale. It was simply about giving her clarity. She now completely understands her equity, she knows her options, and she is firmly in control of her own timeline instead of just reacting blindly to the market. There is actually a quote from the source material that hits the nail on the head for this explainer. It says, "Knowing your home's true value is not about pressure to sell it. It is about giving yourself the full picture so you decide with your eyes wide open." Knowledge is absolutely not a pre-sale requirement. It's really just about putting tangible information into your own hands. It protects you from making rushed decisions based on totally outdated assumptions and lets you plan your next chapter with absolute confidence. So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I want to leave you with this final question to chew on. If you were to pull the curtain back and discover your own home's true value today, what exciting new doors might that open up for your future? Whether it means finally renovating that dream kitchen, exploring a brand new community, or honestly just sleeping a little sounder at night, knowing your financial foundation is rock solid. The very first step is simply getting the data. Thank you so much for joining me, and I really hope this empowers you to take a fresh look at your biggest asset.